as I was in the corporate world and I had these negative experiences with the paper assets. And so I just needed more control. And as I mentioned, so the friends that I had here were saying, but you just invest in the United States. And I was like, well, hang on a second. There's like 8,000 miles between here and where I would buy my closest property, right? Because the Atlantic Ocean was between us. But the thing is, I knew that I wanted to take action and it was time to take action. I had money in the bank. The thing is, I didn't know how to even pick a location.
What excuses do you have for not getting started in real estate? You're probably in the US if you're listening to this, maybe not, but either way, our guest today is going to help you to change your mindset about you can do it. He lives in Spain and built a portfolio in the US that allowed him to leave a very high paying corporate position. And now he gets to enjoy the time freedom to be with his wife, his kids, and do things that he never dreamed about doing. His name is Billy Keels. He's a regular guy from a middle-class family from Columbus, Ohio, who grew up knowing nothing about investing. He gave himself to the challenge of learning everything he could about all things money and investing. Today, he guides others on their path to financial freedom. Billy's going to go through numerous things about his process of investing long distance and how he made that happen. But he's also going to share some of the wins, which I think is encouraging, right? You can make it happen. You can do this, but from a distance even. I mean, he's in another country and he still did it. But he's also going to share or expose to you a couple of asset classes that we've not talked about on the show hardly at all. One of them probably once or twice, the other maybe not at all, maybe once. So I'm excited for you to learn about these other asset classes that I want you to start being aware of in case it's going to benefit you in a massive way on the tax side, but potentially on cash flow as well. Billy, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have this conversation because I know some things about you that I know that's going to help the listeners in a big way. I feel like your story should motivate all of us to really get off our tail and go make it happen that live here in the U.S. Anyway, it's so interesting and congratulations on some big changes you've made. I know we were going to talk about, and we'll probably talk about in the show, but it's because of these decisions that you made, the hard work that you've put in. And I know personally, well, it's not just you, but it's the entire family, right? Your spouse and your wife. I mean, the time commitment to make this happen. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much, Whitney. And I really am feeling just a bit overwhelmed. I'm so fortunate to be here to share the stage with you, and it's great to be able to share a little bit of my story with you and your audience, and also too, since you were kind enough to be one of the first to join me on my podcast in episode 96, which was fantastic, and I just can't thank you enough for joining me there on the Going Long podcast as well. Thank you.
I appreciate that, the kind words, and tell the listeners where you live, and tell us a little bit about your real estate portfolio so they can have an idea of what you've accomplished and how they think they had to have it difficult. But anyway, I want to get into some of those difficulties, but how you've done this.
Yeah, sure. So as you know, because the secret's already out with you. So originally from Columbus, Ohio, and I've moved around a lot as a kid, but ultimately after having been the product of divorced parents, and both parents worked very blue collar jobs, I had a chance to work and travel throughout some 58 countries right after college. It's now 86 countries. And as you know, I've spent the last 21 years living in Europe. Today, I call Barcelona, Spain home. I lived in Italy before that, and I lived in France before that. I was in the IT industry. And I have recently also no longer part of the corporate world. I retired in my late 40s after 26 years in the corporate world. And yes, I've been investing in US-based real assets from Spain since 2013. So
nice. Well, yeah. So you're in Spain. I traveled to 86 countries. There's some skills around traveling that much I wish that I had. But anyway, I'll have to call you to figure out what countries I want to go to or not.
I made lots of mistakes. Let me just put it that way.
Well, but you've built a portfolio in real estate. And while living in another country and obviously traveling a lot, you're in the corporate world. Speak to the portfolio maybe you have now, and let's get into a little bit of how you did that, being so far away. Obviously, if you can do it from Spain or from another country, I should be able to do it sitting in Virginia, right? And so speak to that.
Yeah, sure. So, and I guess one of the things that happened is I never really even thought about getting into real estate. Didn't come from a real estate family or any of that kind of stuff. But I had gone through the dot-com bubble, and I went through the 2008 great financial crisis. And in 2008, it was actually the second time that I'd lost a substantial amount of my portfolio. I actually lost 33% of my portfolio, Whitney. And it was, my parents always told me, like, if something happens once, shame on them. If it happens twice, shame on you. And so this was the second time that I lost control. And so I then started reading books and Rich Dad, Poor Dad and all that kind of stuff. And I watched a bunch of videos and listened to podcasts. But it actually took me about another 3.5 years to actually take action. And the reason that I took action, Whitney, to even start getting involved in real estate is because I remember, and it's one of these things that's kind of left me like marked for the rest of my life, is I was a young father and I told myself that I really wanted to be present for my kids. And I thought I was. And then my oldest son's third birthday, I woke my wife and my youngest son up about 5:45, 6 o'clock in the morning to wake them up because I was actually taking a flight to Frankfurt on my son's third birthday. And so I woke them up because I wanted to give my oldest son a hug and a kiss right before I left. And when I left that morning and I left our flat and going down to the airport, like my heart kind of broke because I was thinking to myself, hang on a second, I'm doing all this stuff. I'm moving up the corporate ladder and I'm missing my son's third birthday party. So that night, and I tell this every once in a while, that I don't even remember what the business meeting was about. I just remember being at a dinner that night in my family with my in-laws and my wife and my 2 children, and they're blowing out the candles while I was at this dinner, right? And so that kind of made me go from theory to action. And I thought about buying property here in Barcelona. I wasn't sophisticated enough at the time, Whitney, to understand the difference between a location that is appreciation based, others that are based on cash flow, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I started penciling things out, the numbers were negative €50, negative €200, and I couldn't understand it. So being a US citizen who actually lives abroad, a couple of my friends here in Spain were like, well, why don't you buy in the United States? So I eventually ended up buying in the US. I built up a portfolio of about 27 units and initially, and they were small multifamilies, and I bought a mobile home park. And then I went down, I started in real estate that way. And I'd been doing this for probably about 2 years or so. It was amazing cash flow. I just didn't have any systems because I was like, things were happening, things were breaking, but the cash flow kept coming in and I just had to stop. And it was at that point that I also found out that there was another thing called passive investing. And I was like, oh my gosh, you mean I can actually give somebody $200,000-$300,000 and they'll do the investing for me? And so then I went from active to also combining passive investing and doing that and being able to build up the portfolio. And I think I've invested over 450 units passively, something to that effect, and gotten into ATM machines and also equipment and things like that. But the initial start was because I wanted more control and I'd been reading so many books and I needed action. And unfortunately, the action was me missing my son's third birthday, but that actually got me started and it got me to the point where at least when it was time to leave the corporate world, I didn't have to really look back and say, hey, like I got to go find my next job. Now I'm at the point where I just want to be able to serve others and do it in a way that makes the most sense for me and for my family. And I just feel very, very fortunate to be in this situation. So.
It's often, it seems that there's like some kind of event like that like opens our eyes a little bit. It's interesting too about the, you mentioned you're missing your son's third birthday party and you don't remember what the meeting was that you were in, but man, you remember that moment, right? You remember missing those candles being blown out, right? And you can't go back and redo that, and I mean, that was just like hits you right in the chest. And so it pushed you to make a change. And man, you started looking for ways to fix that problem, that time freedom problem ultimately. So speak to the long distance investing. Let's dive in. Like you started making it happen. And how do you do that? How did you start communicating? How did you find the first deals? Even to close on the first deal?
Yeah. So, the very first deal, one of the things that I knew, so I was in the corporate world and I had these negative experiences with the paper assets. And so I just needed more control. And as I mentioned, so the friends that I had here were saying, but just invest in the United States. And I was like, well, hang on a second. There's like 8,000 miles between here and where I would buy my closest property, right? Because the Atlantic Ocean was between us. But the thing is, I knew that I wanted to take action and it was time to take action. I had money in the bank. The thing is, I didn't know how to even pick a location. So what I did is I say that it was really based on kind of fear. If everything went wrong, I wanted to have somebody at least close by that I could say, please go by and bail me out of this situation. So I ended up buying in the East Coast. I bought in New Jersey and And when I bought the property, I didn't know anything about lending. I didn't know any of that kind of stuff. I mean, I read the books, but I didn't have the real knowledge. So I was introduced to a number of people that were in the lending space, and found one person that was a lender at a local bank. And that lender walked me through the different lending options, and it was very traditional. I had put 25% down, bought this property, and they introduced me to a general contractor. The general contractor then introduced me to someone who was a real estate broker. The broker introduced me to the agent. And then it was from there. It wasn't even any more sophisticated than that, Whitney. It was just a matter of getting those 3 members on the team and then buying the property. I think I put $20,000 into the property. We got it fixed up and we got it rented. But from there, what I started realizing is I bought the property, but I didn't really have a team in place. And then things started happening. Things started not working properly at the property. And I didn't have any systems. So I had to, just a very practical example, when something broke and the tenants wanted to call, they didn't have anybody to call. And so I realized that was a problem. So I had to fix that problem. And that meant putting in an answering service. And this answering service was 24 hours, 7 days a week. And that was one of a very tactical thing, but that was one of the types of systems that we put into place. And what I realized is I kind of did everything backwards. I bought the property, problems started happening, then put the team together. And then from there, realized I was in a location that was maybe not the best, but I did know the one thing, which was cash flow. So nowadays I try to help people. And I know it's very similar to what you do, is help people to get really clear on what it is they want. More importantly, why they want it. That's the benefit. From there, find the location that can give you the highest probability of being able to get that outcome. Then build your team, right? You build the team because that's the most important part, especially when you're someone who's long distance. When you are 300 miles away or you are 3,000 miles away, you need a really, really strong team. And then afterwards, whatever the opportunity is, that really, it matters, but it doesn't matter, because whatever asset you're bringing into the portfolio, as long as the team understands it and the benefits that you're looking for, they understand the location, then you're putting yourself in the highest probability of success. So that's really kind of how it got started. Why I think from a long distance perspective, the team is absolutely critical. And it's also being able to build the team and taking the steps to show your team members that you're not just making a one-off purchase, but you're really there to build relationships and also make purchases, which means you may start out having an email conversation. Afterwards, you're going to maybe jump to a Zoom, you're going to get on a phone call. But eventually, Whitney, I'm a big believer, and this is what I've done, is you put your money where your mouth is. So I wasn't just trying to meet people on Zoom. At a certain point, I wanted to go deeper into the areas where I was investing. And I actually got on a plane and I flew, met the teams, walked the properties, saw the places that I wanted to invest. And that is one of the big keys, I believe, to being successful investing long distance, is making sure that you take the proper steps and show your team that you're interested in building them, and then actually follow through with making purchases. And that's active or passive.
I'm going to ask, but knowing what you know now, what would you do different? I know you would have had processes and teams, some of those things in place beforehand. But what are a couple of things it's like, oh man, if I had done this, or if I'd had this person in place, or this team member, or this process, my first few deals would have been so much easier.
So there's 2 things that stand out. Number one is making sure that the team that is going to manage the property on a day-to-day basis, it's fundamental. It's absolutely critical, especially if you don't live in the same location, because at the end of the day, we provide a service. And if you have a product with no service, then it's not a very good service. So that's the first thing. I would have put more focus initially, because that's now where a lot of the focus is really on the service aspect. And secondly, without a doubt, I would have made sure that I had much more in reserves than I did at the time. Because especially when you're getting started, depending on what type of property you're purchasing, what type of asset you're purchasing, things can look really nice in the beginning, but eventually things start to happen. And if you don't have the proper reserves, you can find yourself in a pinch. Now, we never got into any trouble with reserves, but definitely would have more reserves just so it can help you to even sleep better. It's the one metric I say nobody talks about, Whitney, which is ROS. I think everybody talks about IRR. We all talk about COC and cash on cash and stuff, but no one talks about ROS. And the ROS is the return on sleep. If we would have had, if we would have had more adequate reserves, my ROS would have been positive, and I would have slept even better at night. So those were the 2 things that I believe if I were to do differently, I would definitely put more focus on service and make sure that I had more reserves to make sure that my ROS was positive.
I love that. I love the ROS. I've not heard of that before. That's clever. It's so important, man. If you're not sleeping well, man, the return on your investment is almost irrelevant, right?
It does not matter. It does not. I always tell people, I say, hey, listen, you want a 400% return? Well, sure. But is your ROS positive or negative? I'm like, what? Your ROS? I'm like, are you going to sleep well at night? I'm like, probably not. Okay. Well, then if it's ROS negative, don't do it. Doesn't matter what the yield is.
Yeah.
No.
So how did this help you to leave the corporate world? You dove into real estate investing. You started learning some of these things the hard way. You started building that team. You came over to the US, which no doubt was a crucial move, meeting that team, seeing the properties market. But then speak to the transition then to leaving the corporate world and knowing that you could continue this.
Sure. So one of the things that happened in starting to invest in real estate, it just opened my mind, because when you were in a corporate construct, and I was a relatively senior executive and was able to continue to move and rise within the organization. And I actually, kind of fell in love with that for a little while. But what I realized was it was kind of one track. I didn't have time to do anything else. That's what I was doing. Then when the thing happened with my son, it opened my mind to say, okay, well, hang on a second. I don't want to this is not the route for me. I'm not going to be doing this forever. And so I needed to figure out something else. And so fortunately for me, real estate came into view, and I had a positive first experience. But once I started having that experience, and the experience became more and more positive, not all positive. I mean, I had, the $25,000 roof issue, and I had other things that were happening in the property. So it wasn't all positive, but overall it was positive. And then that opened my mind to continue to build more relationships with people in that space. And as I started to do that, and I started to travel, and I started to meet, what it did is it said, okay, well, this is something that I wasn't aware of. This is this providing me the outcomes that I'm looking for. So let me look at something else. And so as I started looking at other different assets that fit in with what I wanted from a benefit perspective, maybe more cash flow, maybe more tax benefits, it made me realize that it's just about solving a problem. And so that for me was perfect, because I've worked in sales leadership and sales in an enterprise software company for the better part of 20 years, overall 26 years in corporate world. But I didn't realize that, hey, I just need to solve a problem. And this was solving a problem. It started with the real estate. It moved into other assets, but it's always been about being able to solve problems. That's the biggest benefit for me, for anyone who's been around, and now even for our investors, is that it's given me a thought process of more, what is the problem we're trying to solve, and how can we go about solving this problem? Because there are so many different vehicles that will help get us to whatever destination that we're trying to get to. So I would say that that's really what it was. Speak
to how this has evolved, over your real estate career now. Obviously, leaving the day job is just such a massive change, right? And I've seen it happen in myself, my own family, and others now, as well as people, they make it, right? Or they get to that level. It's like, okay, and then it's almost, it's difficult, right? Because it's such a big change. Like, all right, am I really going to do this? And even others, maybe your friends you've had a long time, are questioning you, all those things, right? But speak to that transition now to the even quality of life, for you, your wife, your kids, compared to, now that hey, it's so worth it, right? To make this transition.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that happened as I was going out looking at different assets and helping to solve different problems, and I solved the passive income problem, I solved the tax problem, and then there was the different, or the, as you'd say before, your passive income, your earned income, and being able to solve these different problems. Then it got to a point where I had a real life situation happen. And I know I mentioned this to you before, but my father had some really significant challenges health-wise in the last part of last year. And that really made me think, because, when you're there and you're in the ICU and you're thinking to yourself, well, I've been working for 9 years. I've been excelling at my day job. I've gone to the President's Club, or whatever the equivalent of that is. And I've been in the top talent program. And I've been doing all of these things, excelling at a high level, doing the work outside of office hours to build the runway for my family and I through investing in other different types of real assets. And then it got to the point where, this is now, it's the day after no longer being in the corporate world. And so I was very fortunate for the work that had been done, because my first thought was not, okay, well, I want to make this change because of what's happening in life. I didn't think this is just going to be a break and then I'm going to go back and start looking for my next software sales job. fortunately, because I'd been doing a lot of the work. So it was now the point of, what are we going to now do to enjoy the quality of life, to be able to continue to go out and serve our investors, to help them get the things that they want, and really be able to enjoy life. And so one of the first things I wanted to make sure that I was doing was really being in control of my time. And we maybe talked about this a little bit, but like one of the things that I have to fight against now is that I really love what I'm doing every day. I love it. Like, it is just thrilling to think we're building this business. We're serving our clients, our investors every single day. And we're still starting up. Right. And so my big thing is to make sure that I'm not continuing to work into all hours of the night, because it doesn't feel like work. I'm loving what I'm doing. I'm building. And so it really helps me also to focus on the things that I wasn't doing. Because when I was traveling, working for a big corporation, I was always focused on where's the next destination, the next big contract that we have to sign, the next quarterly business review, or what's the action plan. And so today, it's about making sure that I have time to spend with my wife. Like, my wife and I went to lunch today, and it was absolutely phenomenal in the middle of the week. And we just had a great time. We talked about what we plan on doing this summer. It was amazing. I spend a lot of time now playing video games, Whitney, with my kids. Like, my boys are young, they're 10 and 12. And that's one of the things I never did, because I always thought, well, playing video games is a waste of time. We just need to do this or do that. But the fact that we can play video games together and it's interaction, they're beating me, so they love that, of course. And it's just so much. But like, I'm enjoying those moments. I flew back to the States just to hang out with my dad and my stepmom and mom for like 4 days, because I found a great ticket. And so it's making sure that I am present in now and being able to enjoy the moments that I have, because we've got 2 young boys. And before I know it, like, our 12-year-old in 6 more summers, he's not going to be home with us anymore. He may probably sooner than that. He won't want to be, but he will be with us.
Right.
And just doing the things. I'm spending time with our investors as well, understanding more about what it is that they want to be able to achieve, what they'd like to be able to do. And so it's being much more intentional about what I'm doing, with whom I'm doing, and also being very present when I am doing those things. Yeah.
I just appreciate you sharing some of that, because I think it's just great for the listener to know, hey, this can happen. It is real. You do have to put the time in, no doubt about it, to make that happen. But man, it's such a quality of life change that most just have never dreamed of or think it's even possible. Well, you've made some other investing changes, or I don't know if investing changes, but different directions that your investing has taken in different asset classes that I would like for you to highlight. Unfortunately, we don't have a ton of time. Maybe we can have you back and talk about these a little more. But I want the listeners to be exposed to these 2 asset classes more. I've briefly heard of them and learned a little about them. We know some of the same people that are doing some of this, but I want them to know about these 2 asset classes that you have ventured into and why.
Yeah, sure. So the first one, I think that goes just beyond real estate, but still a real asset, was investing in ATM machines. It was something, once again, everything is, when I've taken a step back, Whitney, it's really about what is the problem that I was looking to solve. Real estate solved a real problem for me and continues to solve a real problem for me, right? As it relates to passive income. The same thing with the ATM machines. It was creating a more consistent income stream because of this particular deal structure. And that was something that was fantastic for me. But it was also, I wanted to taste what it was like to invest with someone else. Being able to place, as an accredited investor, capital and let them do the work. I could continue working my day job. And then the thing that was also happening was I was someone who was not a real estate professional and was someone who was a high wage earner. So as an accredited investor and making really big bonus checks, I was still, as I was investing passively, the passive income from the real estate was helping, but I was still paying 40+% in taxes. And so that was on my W-2 income. And so I was looking for a way to solve that challenge as it related to W-2 income, because if I could extract some of that capital from paying in W-2 income taxes, then that's other funds that I could then redirect into more passive income. So, and as you know, Whitney, we're not giving anybody any advice or any of that kind of stuff. We're just talking about concepts. But these are the things that the other 2 asset classes that have helped me, specifically the investing in carbon capture and carbon capture machines in the energy sector, that really helped me with the tax problem that I was having in W-2 earned income, because I was not a real estate professional. And it was a way for me then to say, extract capital there and then be able to use it and redeploy it into other types of investment opportunities. So those are the two things: ATM that helped me want more frequent streams of passive income, and then the carbon capture machines, which was helping me as a high wage earner, accredited investor with the tax brackets that I was paying in earned income. So hopefully, just in a really high level, that makes sense, and why I was looking at those two other assets.
That's great. I appreciate the explanation of why, right? And I know listeners have heard of ATMs before, probably used one before, most likely, right? But carbon capture is something we've not heard about, right? Or most people have not heard of much, if at all. Give us like the 60 seconds on what is that? What am I actually investing in?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of people, I'm sure, are familiar with the different bonus depreciation rules. And depending on when they're listening to this, as we were talking about it today, the bonus depreciation rules are at 100% of capital that's invested. Of course, talk to this with your tax professional, and they can tell you about your specific situation. But purchasing large pieces of equipment that help in the increased production of oil and gas and energy sector, and we're investing in these pieces of equipment because of the way that this particular opportunity is structured. What it allows someone who is an accredited investor to be able to do is invest in this piece of equipment. As they invest in the piece of equipment, 100% of their tax bracket, at least as of today, and it may be changing depending on where you are, you're able to reduce that or deduct that from your earned income or your W-2 income, which for someone like myself and a lot of people that were in the software sales space was another way, once again, to be able to extract capital to then redeploy into other types of assets. So today, the type of person that we're serving is an accredited investor. We have people that are, high wage earners, people that are in professional sports organizations, doctors, lawyers, and people that are looking to be able to keep more of their earned income or not pay so much in high income tax. So.
No doubt. It's something that many listening, I'm sure, especially the passive investors who are high income earners, they should consider, looking into some operators around that, and carbon capture and ATMs both probably. But Billy, just to move to a few final questions.
Yeah, sure.
Speak to your best source for meeting new investors right now.
Right now, meeting new there's two kinds of things. There's the volume of investors, and then the best source in terms of being able to meet is actually from our existing investors, because typically they've already told the individuals that they already know, like, and trust why we should be speaking. And so with that introduction, it's much warmer. I would say without a doubt, for people that I've never met before, it's being able to have conversations like these with you, where we're meeting other people that are interested in solving a very specific type of problem. So I would say they're the two kind of ways. Is
there a way that you nurture or encourage the referral process?
This is something that we want to get better at, because the way that it works today, Whitney, is very much just letting our existing clients, our existing investors know. One of the things that we are working on is improving that from an automation perspective. But today it's very much word of mouth, and it's very much our existing investors telling others.
What are some of or maybe one or two of the most important metrics that you track?
Today is not just number of referrals, because what we're looking at more nowadays is what is the value versus volume, just because of the nature of our business. So number one is referrals that are in. And number two, the thing that I'm personally tracking is number of engagements that I'm having like this, to be able to come to the marketplace and tell people what we're actually doing. So those are the two main things that I'm looking at I don't know if it's a day-to-day basis, but on a weekly basis.
What about some daily habits you have that have helped you achieve success?
Without a doubt, I start every morning by myself, Whitney. I start every morning when I found probably 5 years ago, Hal Elrod and the Savers. And so I start every morning with the Savers, with silence, affirmation, visualization, a bit of exercise. I've got a bad back right now, so I'm probably doing more push-ups than I would like to be running, or like to read, and then journal. And so that's the way that I like to start every day, because if I can focus on myself, then I'm able to be the best me for everybody else that's around me.
How do you like to give back?
Right now is being able to give time and really being able to help others, especially people that are in my situation. I was an accredited investor and I didn't know about it. And I like to be able to share knowledge that I've learned from as a financial knowledge, is the way that I like to give back. One of the things that my family and I will be doing this year is actually giving of our time here in Barcelona at a local school.
Nice. So Billy, it's been an honor to have you on and just to catch up again. It's been a while. And so honored to hear more of your story. Really share with the listeners. Hey, if you can do this from Spain, I hope, if you're listening to this in the US, you have no excuse, right? No excuse. You can probably drive to a lot of markets where you could start doing deals, and Billy's had to come a long ways, a lot further than that to make it happen and build his team. And man, think about those difficulties and the time differences that he's had to work through that we don't have that problem if we live here, right? So just appreciate that, Billy, even exposing us to the other asset classes, ATMs, carbon capture. Maybe we can talk about that again in the near future, because both of those things we don't talk about much, but people are syndicating those assets as well, right? And so I love exposing our network of active investors, but also passives, hey, these other opportunities are out there. And so thank you again. Tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you.
Yeah, sure, Whitney. I appreciate the opportunity. And I think, everybody's here that you make yourself and your team very available. So they have a great first stop in you and being able to learn more and access new types of opportunities, expand their mindset. For those of you that want to find out more, Whitney, we just released our new rebrand. So you can find out more about, especially if you're that accredited investor we talked about before and you have the Earned Income Challenge, you can go to firstgencp.com and then /invest. The website is firstgencp.com. And it's so great to kind of be in contact with anyone. And also too, I think I'm the only Billy Keels on LinkedIn in Barcelona, Spain. So if you like LinkedIn as well, I love being able to connect with people there. It's just another way to keep the conversation going. But like I said, Billy Keels, I'm the only one on LinkedIn or firstgencp.com.
Thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. Please subscribe and share it with your friends. We want to help you become the passive investor you've always wanted to become, but also the operator you've always wanted to become. We want to be the #1 resource for your real estate investing journey. But go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can start investing in real estate today.